Great. Well, welcome everybody and good morning. What a glorious sunny day we've got today, and we've got a brilliant lineup of speakers. Really pleased to welcome Jenny Clark, Rob Evans, Robert Lefebure, and Tom Green as well. Today's topic is remote assurance, striking the right balance. Of course, we've been experiencing a huge amount of change, and I'm a great one for quotes, but change is not a threat, it is an opportunity. Survival is not the goal, transformative success is. And in fact, this is one of the areas that I think remote assurance has really kind of broken the mold in terms of speeding up the process in this whole era. So we are very pleased that this is one of a series that Land Management 2.0 have been running. This is one of the roundtable discussions. A little bit of housekeeping for everybody. If you've got any questions, and please do have questions, we're going to hear from each one of the speakers, a bit of a Q&A between myself and them for 10 minutes each, and then there's open floor to questions within that. And if you've got any questions, please wiggle your cursor around and put them in the Q&A. If we have any sort of hijacking of the performance by somebody that we don't really want to be hijacking it, then it will be stopped automatically, but of course this will be rearranged again. And in addition to that, this session is being recorded. So without any further introduction on this, I would really like to go to our first speaker, which is Jenny Clark, who is from Lefebure. Fantastic, Jenny, as our insurance manager, very much at the coalface in terms of what we have done as Lefebure certified assurance scheme in terms of really trying to address the change of the impact of COVID-19. Jenny, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. And hi, everyone. Yeah, we sort of had to kind of change almost overnight how we were delivering Lefebure on the ground when the lockdown became apparent, when the pandemic, really spread across Europe and the countries that we work in. And whilst that changed, the demand for food had not changed. Whilst the supply chain adapted, we still all need to eat, and actually we saw that quite strongly, certainly here in the UK when that first came in, all those empty shelves in the supermarket. And what also hasn't changed is climate change. We might not be marching about that at the moment, but it's still there in the background. So there is very much still a need for us to be delivering the Lefebure assurance system, to be certifying sustainably farmed produce and getting that out onto the shelves. Yet we needed to figure out how to do that in a completely different way. So I think, like most of us, when we've looked for ways to operate differently now that the lockdown has come in, we turn to technology, and whether that being using able to upload documents into a data room ahead of the inspection, and then follow that up with a virtual farm tour, some of which I know we're all kind of seeing in webinars now, but this would be the opportunity to ask questions of the farmer and the staff and the team, and have a visual look around the farm as well through video chat, which I think we're all now doing a lot more often of. And it became quite apparent as we were figuring out how this could work that actually the Lefebure standard was really well adapted to moving in this direction. So whether it being because based on the principles of integrated farm management, it's quite a plan-based standard. So all of those plans that have been really well adapted to the individual site could be uploaded ahead of the virtual farm tour. And
I guess the Leaf Sustainable Farming Review has been quite useful as well, as in terms of supplementary information in that area.
Exactly, yeah. So our businesses are already used to filling in a self-assessment online of kind of thinking about integrated farm management all year round. So the paperwork was there that could be uploaded, and that went really smoothly. As well as the farmers we get to work with are often, really innovative, really at the forefront. They're really good at tackling problems and coming up with solutions as well. So they've really adapted to this well, and looked to take this in and seen the benefits that it could bring to their business as well. And yeah, we've seen it go really well. So we launched the remote assurance on the 1st of May, and since then we've had over 60 leaf mark inspections take place. And we've seen it's suitable for all farm types as well. So that's something we do at Leafmark. We are a whole farm system. We work with a variety of different farms, and this is something that's been working across all those farm types.
No, well, thank you. And it's been a real embrace. And, you know, obviously, what opportunities do you see this in terms of going forwards now that we've started this? Because as with anything, you know, once you've kind of gone through the door, there's no turning back. And, you know, what opportunities are you seeing going forward from here now?
Yeah, and it's actually been really eye-opening for us. We've, as Leaf and Leafmark, have been talking about different approaches, future approaches to assurance for actually quite a while. But the way auditing has operated, not just in farming, but across all sorts of sectors, has been quite, you know, similar, and has always had that kind of on-site element. So to try and make a change has been like trying to turn like a massive ship. But actually, I think this has shown people, and even ourselves who were already in thinking this space, really opened our eyes into what could be done, and different approaches. So not just to us as scheme setters, but to the auditors and to the farmers as well, of how this can work. And yeah, we'll certainly be taking learnings from how our remote auditing has been going, to see if we can adapt our assurance model. Because Leafmark is you know, always been about recognising and rewarding the best environmental farm practices. And so if this could take us even further into that continual improvement element, that kind of really seeing the benefits of being Leafmark certified, then that would be amazing. So yeah, we're having a look now at how could we use remote assurance in the future, or you know, how could we use elements of it? So perhaps, you know, have a risk-based approach. So if you've been with us for a really long time, then and have a really great track record, then could we look at maybe extending the certification cycle or looking at different ways of auditing? Caroline mentioned the Leaf Sustainable Farming Review, so that self-assessment element, could that be pulled out more strongly? And could we use different elements of technology? So not just the complete kind of remote auditing we're looking at now, but could we look at how you know, mapping has changed and is online now, or you've got, you know, so much more use of GPS and tagging on photos you've taken. So actually, rather than auditing being a one-off event, one per year, could there be the demonstration of positive outcomes that are happening all year round?
So that'll be music to Tim's ears on the Land app, that's for certain.
Little plug.
And obviously one of the big challenges, or one of the real benefits from a Leaf perspective, is that we run a global standard. We took that big decision, you know, are we about UK farm assurance for UK consumers, or are we about, you know, really about hard and fast sustainability? And so that importance of global shared knowledge, information, and of course we're importing produce, has been really, really key for us. And I think it's obviously coming to a head at the moment. You know, those people that we're importing produce from should be required to meet the same values and standards obviously expected of our own farmers. So that's something really important for us from a Leaf perspective. How has this worked, do you think, on the assurance for the UK and some of our global partners in particular?
Yeah, really topical at the moment, as you say. That's in the UK, we're sort of discussing the Ag Bill at the moment. But yes, and that's something we looked at when we designed the remote assurance. It needed to be applicable to all our farm types, not just here in the UK, but in the other 26 countries that we certify in, which, you know, as far as we understand, it is working well. Although we were lucky that as we were looking at introducing the remote auditing here, countries in Europe were now stepping back their lockdown restrictions, and I think we're seeing that still happen, although second spikes can happen, etc., etc. So we're, you know, keeping a watch on that. But I think we were lucky that actually some on-site auditing could still be taking place in some of those other countries. But that is something that, when I talked just before about, you know, future approaches and bringing this into kind of Leafmark as a whole, not just something we're doing in an emergency situation, we would need to make sure it was applicable for all. And probably the challenge we are seeing, that we're getting the most support on, is the access to technology. And while, you know, even in this country, like, we don't always have great signal where we are, we aren't always the most computer literate, or working in that way. So that might be the biggest barrier that we're looking at. And certainly maybe in other countries, some of the really small producer groups that we work in that produce some of our wonderful fresh fruit and veg, you know, how does that work for people who maybe don't have access to phones and the like? So we definitely would need to look at that going forward, and how, you know, what option could be there for that, or where we need to provide extra support.
Mm. However, though, from my experience, a lot of the Indian and African farmers and Chinese farmers, in fact, that we work with, obviously have often very good technology access. And we couldn't have done this 10 years ago, without a doubt. And I think one of the things that, you know, we are so fortunate that that speed of technology has been just incredible. I mean, I think if I look back to where we developed the first leaf audit back in 1993, it was a carbon copy document. Before your time, Jen, but you know, the very fact that the speed of technology is something, you know, it happens faster and faster every year. So it does mean all these things are going to be much more easier and effective going forward. And just one sort of final question for you, Jen, before I move on to Rob. How have the farmers responded to all of this? What's the sort of feedback you're getting?
Really positive, or we don't hear much, which we take as really positive, because often people call this if they're having a technical problem. So yeah, some of the, because we're now asking you to upload all your plans in one go, some have felt that, hang on a minute, that's quite a lot to do, because you're seeing it in one chunk, rather than perhaps if the audit was happening, you'd be talking about your soil management plan, then you'd have a chat about that, and then you talk about your next plan. Whereas, you know, when you see a long list of plans, and we do our inspections jointly with other schemes, so in the UK that would be Red Tractor, overseas perhaps Global Gap or BOP, depending on the sector, so you're perhaps uploading quite a long list of documents. So that's been a little bit of the only downside I think we've seen from our growers, saying, oh, hang on a minute, it's quite a lot of paperwork, and particularly if the weather's nice like today, do you want to be sitting inside uploading all of that? Maybe not. But on the flip side, we've also heard that the sort of the on-farm element, the remote video call, is often quite quicker for farmers, because the auditor's not sitting there reading the paperwork with you. So that's been really rewarding, and some have even said it's even more thorough. And you know, there's an element of yeah, that chat's still happening. So yeah, it's been going down really well, as I say, and because of the positive feedback we've had, we've even allowed from last week that new applicants could come into the system as well. We originally thought of them as quite high risk. If you've never come across an audit before, if you're really unfamiliar with Leaf Mark, to be thrown into this world might have been a bit too much, and the auditor might not be familiar with your farm. But actually, because of the positive feedback we've had, it's proved to us it is as traceable, it is as credible, it is as robust. And as I say, sometimes you know, and as thorough as how the on-site auditing was operating. Then we've rolled it out across all our members.
No, absolutely key. Well, thank you very much indeed, Jen, and it gives me now great pleasure to introduce Rob Evans. So Rob, you're from SAI Global and one of the auditors, so very much at the forefront. So I could be mean and say, surely this has done you out of a job, totally. But actually, in terms of that independent assessment is a very core part. But golly, overnight, again, a huge change to your business, a lot of planning, I would imagine, and a lot of reassessment. How has it happened? How has it worked?
Well, as you say, a huge change suddenly overnight. All systems of work changed, and that led to an awful lot of planning. Initially, planning for different scenarios till we knew what was going to work. I mean, the biggest change day to day is, of course, that we are all working from home. Certification decision makers have always operated to some extent remotely, but our support staff from the offices, our assessors on farm, suddenly all working from home. And that's led to some problems. We don't have access to the big printers. That's been very inconvenient.
Yes.
And anything coming into the office by post is subject to a huge delay. So if someone is posting in corrective evidence or posting in checks for payment, there's a very long time lag on that. So we've become more reliant than ever on technology and technological answers. Fortunately, we earlier in the year, we completed a migration of our phone system over to our laptops. So although we don't have access to the physical office, we have our virtual office wherever we go. So if you call my Milton Keynes number, I answer it here in Cheshire.
Wow.
We also incorporated Microsoft Teams, which has been really useful for internal communications, video and voice conferencing, but it's also been really useful for remote audits as well. We can invite members who are not part of our network to join meetings, and there's a very effective video voice conferencing screen sharing. So yes, we have become much more reliant on that. Ironically, it's probably led to better communication within our team because we have daily calls lined up. Previously, when we were physically in the office, we might meet with some of the team one week, some of the team another. Now it's very much more we talk as a team, everybody. And of course, we're doing far fewer miles in our cars, so we're much better environmentally.
How's the waistline coming along?
Yeah, it's coming along nicely. What I've found particularly is that how heavy hair is. So I've not had a haircut in 3 months, and you know it weighs kilos and kilos, all this hair. So it's quite remarkable, really.
But I mean, as you say, I mean that whole switch though in technology has been incredible. But it must be quite difficult because when you're on farm, you are sort of able to kind of almost spread out information, visualize information. Now you're not in that same sort of 3D impact or almost sort of 45D impact in some situations as well, because it's supplemented with voice from the farmers and things. How's that panning out?
Yeah, that's a double-edged sword. We get greater depth of information from the documents and the pictures that are uploaded to the data platforms. As Jenny alluded to earlier, sometimes the assessments on those parts can be more thorough. But then even with the best signal and the most able member on the other end of the phone showing us what they're showing us on these video calls, we don't have the same flexibility as if we are physically on farm to look in a corner and go, "Ooh, what's that?" and go off and change the direction of the audit, go on to different little
Can you
trails.
ask a farmer to sort of supplement that with video footage or?
Absolutely. Where we do find bits that we just need some more information, the farmers members generally have been extremely positive about taking a video clip and then putting it onto the data platforms so that we can get into more detail. It's just a little bit more time lag in between asking the question and getting the solution than if we were physically on farm. So a huge amount of success in the remote assessments, excuse me, but it will still be good to get physically onto the farm for parts, just to get a proper balance and to get a really thorough and robust assessment. It's a stopgap being completely remote.
So, I mean, going forwards, what do you sort of see happening? Do you see a kind of a hybrid of this, or an opportunity for your best performers to have 3 years of a remote assessment? How do you sort of, what are your thoughts going forward on this?
I think hybrid is more likely. The ability of a standard to have remote assessments in alternate years for high performers would be driven by the standards owners. That wouldn't be for a certification body to decide unilaterally. But if that's what gets written into the standard rules, that's what we work with between ourselves, the standard owner, and our accreditation bodies. In all these things, that is very much a teamwork between these different stakeholders. And to be honest, with the remote assessments happening so quickly after we were put under lockdown, I think that paid testament to how well at least those three, and then the members, the fourth set of stakeholders, work together to get a working system. But carrying on as a hybrid, this access to the documents that members can load up 1 year, they can review on the data platforms, or they can load up new versions on data platforms throughout the course of the year. Then the assessor getting in the days leading up to a physical assessment to do all the paperwork trudge will lead to much more effective on-site assessments. When we are allowed to go on-site, we will be much more focused to the implementation of these policies and actually going and seeing things in action, rather than, as you said earlier, a lot of time sitting around the kitchen table, drinking tea and eating biscuits whilst we read the documents to then go out and check for compliance. We'll have eaten our own biscuits and drunk our own tea the day before. We get on fine and we can go into areas where we might have queries, or we can really see things in action. And it should lead to hopefully a much more positive experience for the members throughout assessments generally, and very much more detailed and thorough inspections to report back to the scheme owners.
And I guess it's very reassuring, because also it offers some of the sort of the minute type opportunities as well. And we're going to see a big change next year with regards to the UK leaving Brexit, and the opportunity for giving credence, like we have with earned recognition and the Environment Agency, in independently, externally verified standards such as LEAF-Mark, is going to be really important. And I love the fact, your inspectors are very well trained, they're very well sort of certified in their own capabilities as well. And where do you see this real opportunity for you as an independent inspector to actually support some of the evidence that government needs to be collected?
It's that thoroughness. We've mentioned how much we've relied upon technology, and with a lot of LEAF-Mark members, they are very technically able. Unfortunately, it's the case that there are still areas where we don't have good telephone signal, where we don't have good internet access, or where either the members or the assessors don't have the appropriate handsets, and remote audits for them are not the answer. They're part of the answer. So the on-site audits will continue for those members, and we will still have to gather all that evidence on those. So we will still have to be extremely thorough, but whatever other requirements can be satisfied by the depth of the audits. If a specific item has to be inspected and reported back more thoroughly, we have increased opportunities now to be able to find that evidence, to be able to support any kind of, as you say, earned recognitions for supporting whatever parties need to use information.
Brilliant. No, well, thank you. And thank you, Rob, for your continued support of LEAF-Mark as well. The team really appreciate your engagement and involvement in how we develop and make the standard much stronger. So thank you very, very much indeed.
It's a pleasure to be part of the process.
Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Robert Lefebure. Getting there, Robert, with your surname. Robert is from ISEAL. We love ISEAL. We're very proud to be ISEAL members. And I think it would be great if you could just share with the audience actually what ISEAL does and who it stands for as well.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the invite to this panel discussion. Topic close to my heart. So I'm really excited to be here and speak with all of you today. So ISEAL. So thanks for the nice shout out. So ISEAL is basically a global membership association for credible sustainability standards. We have over 20 members today, and including LEAF-Mark, but a lot of other sort of other big known sustainability standards that you know, such as FSC for forest, Rainforest Alliance, MSC for fisheries, and so on. The list goes. What it means to be an ISEAL member is that these are standards that have committed to be part of a process and a community with us and adhere to our codes of good practice. There's a lot to that, but really what it means is that we are effectively a community that together we try to work a lot together with our members to really sort of share and implement best practice. Standards as a global tool is a great force for change, and a lot of what we do is about continually improving what we can do and become as effective as possible to drive that change, whatever the issue may be that each individual standard ones to implement, be it more biodiversity, more sustainable fisheries, etc. So that's, in a nutshell, is what we are about. And besides the codes, I mean, and that's a practical example of this, which is one of the reasons I'm so pleased to be on a panel today, is that we just launched a 6-month project supported by IDH to tackle the very issue we're talking about today. So we are in the midst of this crisis. Physical audits have, for some parts of operations, stopped completely. So what can we learn from this? Like, how can we go forward? How can we, it's a horrible tragedy that's occurring, but what can we learn from this that we can then help position ourselves to, God forbid something like this happens again, but, future crisis scenarios are more or less inevitable. It may hopefully not be as bad as it is today, but something else may occur that's going to prevent us from keeping our businesses running as usual.
I think you're right there. I mean, COVID-19's bad, but we haven't begun to see the impact of some of the climate change, particularly on the Forestry Stewardship Council and some of their work. Can you adapt? And as you say, the ISEAL is a community, and we really do value that community because it brings a lot of global sharing and ideas. And could you just sort of expand a little bit on how some of these other organizations have dealt with what has been overnight again for very many countries, whether it be Indonesia or whether it be Norway, UK, etc., how they have adapted to that?
Well, so in the standards community, obviously, a lot of us being dependent on physical audits to sort of maintain that integrity, that assurance. An immediate response across the board was basically different levels of force majeure policies. So it could be that some completely stopped doing all audits, others went for not having new certificates being allowed during this time period, and others, just like previous speaker Rob was talking about, some standards had systems in place where you could perhaps keep operations going on the highest performers, the lowest risk entities, and you allow that to be conducted in a remote fashion. But that's, so I think as a community, what we're seeing, certainly a lot of policies were built out of necessity, ad hoc. Others had policies in place that they sort of evolved to fit this scenario. But there's not, one answer here. I think it really, and it's not like one sector or a group of members or anyone has it like figured out that like this is the way forward, right? Because a lot of what we do is very bespoke. Like all of us have all standards are trying to solve different things. That all requires different types of information, different types of data, different types of interactions with your clients, and that creates solutions that are tailored to solve those problems, right? So a little bit vague, but that's basically what's happening right now, I think. The interesting bit is how we move now from these sort of short-term solutions, and not just from a policy and process angle, but also from a technology angle. How are we taking the short-term and transforming that into long-term solutions that can help build operational resilience and future-proof us for future uncertainties? So I think that's the interesting bit we're in right now.
Yes, and have you can you give us the heads up on any of your feelings in that particular area as to which bits of technology is going to support that? I know the RSPO, the Responsible Sustainable Palm Oil, have been using things like drones for the observation of orangutan nests to demonstrate that there isn't more deforestation, or the impact on the environment has been something different. And I think certainly in farming we often use technology for the farming part and not necessarily for the environment part. So I was wondering, how have you seen some of that technology heads up coming along?
It's a really interesting question, and it's also a broad one. I mean, as a to preface this, I mean, I think the act of remote auditing is something, of course, that it's not new. Like, that's been going on for a long time. And that the solution to remote auditing in itself can be very low tech. It can be a Skype call or a team call, emails, PDFs, things like that, right? But now what we're seeing, obviously, say, and I'm not sure this is necessarily going to be true, but something to discuss. We may now be gradually moving, because of COVID and perhaps other reasons, into a space where remote auditing becomes more of an exception rather than the norm. And then I think the questions that a lot of people are currently grappling with is, how do you get persistent information coming into your system that allows you to pinpoint risks of where to go? How do you audit most effectively? Like, who are the highest performers? Where are the risks? And that information can't come from audits alone. It has to come from somewhere else. And I think that's where, people are developing. I mean, drones is obviously a very fancy way of doing it, but that technology is becoming a lot cheaper, and I think it is being applied a lot more than we perhaps think. It's being used a lot in indigenous communities to sort of map out their areas in terms of land management. It's an interesting application I read about just a couple of weeks ago. But in terms of generic solutions, so we're looking at data capture, looking at more persistent feeds. Obviously, spatial data is a common sort of key here, visualizing where highest risks may be, or even if you have enough information moving into a space of predictive analytics to sort of predict where the next thing may be. And like, oh, I'm definitely going to send auditors to the north, but not to the south because of XYZ reasons, right? If you have a digital traceability system, which some people are either developing or have implemented already, across the whole supply chain, you can get persistent data feeds to sort of come in to try and alert you to where the next action may need to be triggered. But there's also, people are looking at sensor technology. So there's a lot, but it really depends on what the issue is you're trying to solve. And I think another debate that's sort of been occurring in the community is really, what is the issue you're trying to solve? We'll see how it sort of manifests itself, but obviously some issues are harder to look at remotely than others. Social issues, for instance, being one that sort of comes up a lot in conversation. How are you reliably gonna detect risk of, say, forced labor in a remote fashion, or even workers' rights, something as simple as that, which is something that's gonna come up,
Yes.
Keeping our supply chains going, keeping that assurance going. It's not all forced labor, but it's also now just general health and safety of workers. Is that being, maintained? And how are you going to assure that? And who checks on that? And can you trust that data coming in? So there's a lot of questions around that. But then perhaps other issues that are, maybe some environmental issues are easier because there is publicly available data that sort of tracks that at a country level, at a global level. Standards can have access to that, and that can help you give an idea of where the highest risks are without necessarily going on site. So,
yeah, no, I thank you for that. I mean, and you raise one of the sort of the highlights I think that we get out of working with ISEAL is this is about a force for change, as you have very clearly articulated. And what we value is the capability to look at other people's problems to actually find solutions for our own challenges. And I think that is something that will only get harder, and you raise a lot of questions, but actually from those we can get some really very practical solutions. And so thank you very, very much indeed, Robert. And I'm really pleased that we're starting to see a lot of things starting to come through as well. So I would now like to introduce Tom Green. Tom is from Spearhead International. He's also involved in Hummingbird and is sort of wearing very many different hats, but one of obviously our favourite hats is the fact that he is LeafMark chairman as well. So thank you very much, Tom. I would obviously like to ask you about your ambitions on the LeafMark front, but actually I was just wondering, in terms of just listening to Robert and what Robert was saying about the use of technology, whether you'd like to add to that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. It's a great pleasure to be with you all today. and meet the other panelists. I think I'd start off by saying that the situation we're in today, the COVID crisis, is on the face of it appallingly difficult and challenging for many people, and it's causing untold suffering, and the consequences of it will live on for many years and are difficult to measure today. But in amongst and underneath that cloud, there are some enormously beneficial, positive things that the resourceful people and businesses that we all represent are managing to harness. And I must say, I reflect quite regularly on how incredibly fortunate we are that the global community finds itself facing up to this crisis today at a time when the internet is so sophisticated. Because the one thing that we've all completely relied upon is our ability to continue to communicate with one another and for supply chains to carry on working, pretty much all of which has been internet based. So that revolution, which is now 30 years old, has delivered, you know, the ability that we're now benefiting from so much. I think otherwise there are an enormous number of remote technology solutions that will be accelerated by this crisis, and we will look back on this period of time and see that what might have taken, you know, years or even decades to come to pass will have happened in a matter of weeks and months, because old ways of working will have been swept away by necessity, and all of the sort of barriers associated with inertia, because people don't like change and they're fearful of change, that inertia has just been removed. And so in some areas we're going to make huge leaps forward. And I was very interested that your conversation with Robert got onto the subject of technology, because especially wearing my Hummingbird hat, there we've got a business that has originally started off by using drones and UAVs to look at farmland and develop algorithms to enable farmers to be given advice on treatments, variable rate treatments, etc., as a result of observations made. But increasingly, we've seen there the opportunity to migrate that kind of thinking from drones and UAVs up to satellites. And as you move to the use of satellite, you unlock a whole load of new opportunities, including, of course, the ability to scale up something, which is by almost definition, when using a drone, it's small scale and expensive. When you move to using a satellite, it's almost unlimited in terms of scale, because there's global coverage, and it's very much cheaper to deploy. And so that's a very, very exciting aspect in so many aspects of our lives. But from a farm and landscape and environmental sustainability point of view, it plays into all sorts of critical areas, not least the ability to identify crops from space, so we can do crop type classification. We're building the ability to identify cultivation techniques that have been adopted, the ability to, building on the crop type classification, to identify cover crops that are in place, or forestry as opposed to permanent pasture as opposed to cultivated land, and how perhaps residues are managed after crops. So are you incorporating the residue after your crop or taking it away? How many weeks of the year is the land fallow? These are really pretty essential drivers of farm sustainability, and all of which are capable of being identified from space. And so there's just an example. At the same time, there are now remote wireless devices that can monitor every aspect of your crop's health, whether it's below the soil. We can look at water percolation, we can look at soil structure, we can look at moisture, of course, and then above the crop we're looking at humidity, we're looking at rainfall, of course, and solar radiation, and the extent of sophisticated crop models, physiology-driven models that enable decisions to be taken today that care for crops, but also critically, we're moving from a situation where we've made typically whole farm or whole field decisions to the ability where in the future, and indeed today in some instances, we're making decisions meter by meter or even plant by plant to absolutely maximize the plant's ability to thrive in the environment and to at the same time minimize the use of any kind of input.
And I mean, just on that, you know, I'm always reminded of Ali Hunter Blair saying, you know, I can make decisions on the size of a 50p piece. And I think that, as you say, there's a lot of farmers out there kind of saying, you know, bring it on, because this is where there is such a tremendous opportunity for really trying to make sure that they can match what they're delivering in the marketplace with actually the enhancement of their performance on farm. And I think that's something from a Leaf Mark perspective we're very, very keen to do. And I think it's always something that we pride ourselves in that this is sort of almost beyond and behind the importance of Leaf Mark in terms of demonstration of sustainability and on-farm sustainability, but it's actually of use to the farmer. And I think what you illustrate in that piece is a critical part.
Yeah.
It brings me on to the question in terms of, you know, I think we've always been pretty innovative within Leaf Mark, but, you know, scalability, as you say, is something that's really, really important. Where do you think our ambition, and obviously as our chairman as well on Leaf Mark, how do you see our ambition going forwards over the next 5 and 10 years, Tom? Because I think it's almost we're of the moment, but we need to be, you know, very innovative in terms of driving that forward as well.
Sure. Well, thank you, Caroline. I think it goes without saying that I'm endorsing and really enthusiastic for the uptake of all of these technologies that are available to us, and we don't need to spend longer delving into that. But let's think about who we're here for. Who do we serve? And the constituencies that we serve are first and foremost, perhaps, the farmers who want assurance because they know that for two reasons. Firstly, they want to make sure that their farm is cared for and the natural resource that they have custodianship for is going to be in as good or better a condition when they hand it on to the next generation as it was when they took it on. And technology enables us to do that. We can be better at that by learning from one another day by day. So farmers are determined to do that, but farmers are also determined to ensure that their produce, whatever it is they're producing, which could be food or energy or protein or any number of different products that come from the farm, can get to the market in the most efficient manner and then find itself in an attractive premium market situation. And that leads me on to the next constituency of folk who are interested, who one might have said are the most important, but I started off with the farmers because I think that's where it all starts from. But the next lot, of course, are the consumers. And consumers today are endlessly aware of and concerned about what it is they are purchasing to feed to themselves and their family. Is it going to be healthy? And equal importance is, how has this food been sourced? Has it come from a sustainable source? Is the place where this food came from being managed in a fashion that is positively contributing to a better environment, or neutral, or making the environment worse? Sort of simple questions that we are now able to provide evidence for, and increasingly we'll be able to give real confidence to consumers through the way they purchase their food. Which leads me on to the next two groups, which are the international food brands, manufacturers who are procuring food in order to make their products, and the retailers who deliver those products to consumers. And in those instances, for both international brands and retailers, one thing they have in common is that the most valuable item on their balance sheet is their brand. It's not the shops or the trucks or any other physical asset, it's the brand. It's the brand that it communicates trust, reliability, quality, safety, value, whatever it is that they want to communicate. But at its heart is the reputation of the brand. And these days, if one was a fly on the wall in the boardroom of those great companies, the concern around environmental sustainability would be on every single board discussion. And that stems from the fact that genuinely, I think the directors of those companies really care about it and want to make sure they're doing the right thing, but also they're jolly fearful of being found out and getting it wrong, because they understand how very much the consumers care about this and how damaging it can be for their reputation. And finally, of course, there's the government, who, like it or not, regulate us all, and who I purposefully mentioned last, because I always want the government to be last, because I want the government to be led by what is clearly observed from the behavior of the population, and what the leading businesses do, what the farmers do, and what the consumers do is what the government must reflect. It's always rather frightening when the government has to be on the leading foot and take those decisions for us before it's got the evidence to support policy making. So government also, and here we are in Britain today, where there's a greater change to the way we operate our farming industry and we manage the countryside than ever before, probably. And hopefully, and I think there is good evidence that policy is shifting in a direction that's that is generally very positive. It's very environment focused. It's very much responding to the concerns that are out there that arise from the climate crisis, but go so much further in terms of health and well-being of both humans and animals and the biodiversity, etc. So you asked me, and I'm rabbiting on, but you asked me what is our aspiration? Our aspiration for Leafmark is that we should be addressing ourselves to all of those constituencies, and that we should be seen as a solution that gives farmers the signposts and the tools to help them farm more sustainably, and gives all of the others, brands, retailers, consumers, and government, evidence-based confidence to get behind us and to get behind those businesses. It's critical that we say we've got evidence, because and happily, the growing body of technology that we've got around us enables us to collect that evidence. Because you should be able to go onto a farm and ask the farmer, please explain to me, for every management decision you've taken, whether it's a cultivation decision or a crop protection decision or an animal husbandry decision, why did you do that? And what was the motivation for that decision? And the farmer should be able to say, well, I chose to adopt this practice with this active ingredient at this rate because of this evidence. And the evidence came because I have a weather station that's remotely telling me what the weather conditions are, which tells me I'm in a hugely high risk moment for mildew appearing in my crop. And I've measured it and I've got the data to describe it. And so I've used this crop protection material absolutely with justification. And that's what I believe well-informed consumers and brands need to be receiving.
No, thank you very much, Tom. And as you say, that's very much, doing the right thing for the right reasons in the right place at the right time are very, very core to the integrated farm management and obviously the Leafmark approach. And we can still do better, but there's, yes, those fundamentals. Thank you so much, Tom.
Let me just say one more thing.
We've got a wonderful line of questions here too, but yes,
just
very
quickly. It is that for Leafmark, and sometimes you and I don't necessarily agree on this. I don't personally aspire for Leafmark to be a consumer, to be a brand that is recognised by everybody in the world walking down the street. That would be wonderful. We'd love for people to know that LEAF stands for linking environment and farming, and I'm only going to buy a product that's got the Leafmark on it. But I think that would be naively over-optimistic of us. What we would love to think is, however, that the Leafmark and our standard and our way of working is embedded in everybody else's standard with regard to environmental farm sustainability, and integrated farm management underpins that. So we are entirely comfortable with white labeling the Leafmark standard for others, and indeed we do so today. So there are some folk who collaborate with us who display Leafmark on their produce, most notably, and for the longest period of time, it's the UK retailer Waitrose. But elsewhere around the world and in the United Kingdom, there are others who are using Leafmark standard, but they might be describing it as their own sustainability standard, and that is fantastic. And we love those people, and we want to work more closely with those. So there's no restriction, whether it's in the UK or elsewhere around the world, to the way people adopt Leafmark. I think that's pretty important.
I think you're right, and in fact we've got some questions around this sort of area as well. And it's a good reminder that 43% of UK fruit and veg is Leafmark certified, and much of that is unlabelled. Anybody over 50 will know if you don't go shopping with your glasses, you can't see the labels anyway. So some wonderful questions coming through. Two for you that I'm going to sort of merge, Rob. I can do this. So one is, what are the gaps from Guy Fallon? What are the gaps, blind spots of current technologies from an assurance perspective? And what technological advances look most valuable to assurance going forward? And I'd just kind of quite like to merge that in with a question from Ash Gilman as well, in terms of, with the movement from Leaf, Red Tractor and RSPC Assured moving to deliver an online solution, do you see an opportunity for farms to preload a lot of that data onto a secure portal to ensure only farmers or producers can upload them just the once?
Short answer, yes. The gap that I'd been considering is pretty much answered by Ash's question. With LeafMark, we have these remote data room. With other standards, they have their own data portals. There's an awful lot of information that many farmers already keep on electronic systems, and there are many farmers who don't have any kind of electronic systems. If there was some way of having linkage between either the standards data platforms or a shared data platform, so that a member doesn't have to load up similar information to multiple places. If there were a single repository that we could have access to at given times to look at compliance for the assessment, or even more open access for demonstrating 365 compliance with standards, that could be a great boon. It could reduce the amount of time each year that members might be loading information to the platforms. It might be where they keep their live working documents and keep their live working records, which could be positive for them as well. But of course, we still have to consider this easy, cheap and accessible method, so that members who currently don't feel at home with technology and don't keep electronic records, that there is some way of inputting their information so that they're not at a disadvantage to the more technologically adept ones when it comes to assessments. What the solution for that is beyond me, but I'm sure there are much brighter people than me who could come up with some method to help these members who prefer to keep their documentation on paper to access such a system were it to exist.
No, thank you for that. I've got a question really from a Leaf perspective over to you, Jenny. One from Rupert Turnbull. Thank you, Rupert. Lots of wonderful questions coming from you. With so many assurance schemes, labels and choice for consumers, how does Leaf differentiate itself from the rest? For example, the recent updated Red Tractor assurance scheme on the free range chicken, the orange, the enhanced welfare, purple, organic, green, etc. And I think that actually sort of fits in with another question from Helen Wyman, which is, have we considered LeafMark for the renewable energy crops that are grown to increase sustainability standards? There's a wide range of standards within the industry, and obviously they're very keen to increase these, and your help would be much appreciated. So Jen, over to you.
Yeah, I think we've probably, between you, me and Tom, we've probably covered quite a bit of, what LeafMark covers and things. But yeah, just to say again, we're obviously the environmental element. So we build on Red Tractor and other assurance systems that will cover off parts of welfare, parts of some of the basics around crop health protection, some of those workers' rights that Robert mentioned. And then we're looking at the environmental element. And what differentiates us is that we are built on integrated farm management, which means we're a whole farm scheme. So we cover all crops on the farm, because nothing in farming acts in isolation. So we don't think you can separate out, oh, I'm just going to look at this one field of veg. Particularly when it comes to the environmental elements of soil and the nature, biodiversity, water management. So we cover all cropping systems. So to cover off then Helen's question, very welcome to be growing crops for fuel and then to be in the LeafMark system. And the standard would be very applicable for those crops as well. and so they're just as important that they are grown to environmental reasons. So yeah, that's where we are pitching ourselves as a whole farm system. We're very site specific, so about adapting good practices to what's going to work for you, and then demonstrating that through the standard, through those plans I talked about earlier, and that continual improvement element, so always looking to improve, and you know, that sort of questioning of why you're doing what you're doing, and which Tom mentioned as well, that the decisions you're making are highly informed and are definitely going to be right for you and right for the environment as well. So yeah, that's how we differentiate ourselves. You can be organic and also be leaf mark. You're more than welcome. You can be doing regenerative agriculture practices. You can be doing conservation ag. You know, integrated farm management is a wonderful umbrella that covers all of these things. And as long as you're, you know, performing environmentally sustainably, then yeah, you'll be more than welcome.
Tom, yes.
Just to add to that, another important point of differentiation is our international footprint. Whilst we're based in the United Kingdom, and many of our leading members are farmers and demonstration farmers, particularly are UK based, we're in an international organisation with I think leaf mark farmers in 27 different countries, and that is really important because we're here to look after consumers, and consumers are eating food, the ingredients of which, and indeed the whole of many foods, are procured from overseas, and part of the complexity that manufacturers are facing up to is the sort of life cycle analysis of their whole product range and the enormous number of ingredients that we consume. So there are very few foods that happily, as Caroline says, we've got 40-odd% of UK fruit and veg is leaf mark accredited, but actually so much of what we eat has some imported element to it, that having a standard that is applicable to farmers across the globe and can therefore be rolled out to more and more of our ingredient suppliers and product and out of season suppliers will be great for British consumers, as well as those businesses in those countries.
Absolutely critical, thank you. Got a good question here from Alice Mushlin at the University of Reading. We're looking forward to bringing the experiences of developing a platform for remote assessment for cross-compliance in one of the new Horizon 2020 projects, recap, into the new Vision project. And we're working with you, and we're really looking forward to that, Alice, so thank you for that. With your experiences from remote assessments completed so far, do you feel there's a greater acceptance for farmers for this kind of approach? So maybe Rob and Robert, your experiences, what would farmers value from a new platform that could facilitate something like this? Are there any privacy concerns in terms of sort of Big Brother up there with the drones and satellites? So Robert, do you want to kick off with that? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, that's a good question. And that idea of value is actually central to a lot of the stuff that's going to happen, I think, in how we develop these solutions going forward. It also relates to the earlier question, you know, what are the gaps? So I'm not being very articulate yet, but I'm going to get there. I mean, I think there is, COVID more than anything has obviously triggered this need for information, right? And we've talked a lot about the solutions that people are developing. Now, from a sustainability standard perspective, I mean, it is an ecosystem of people. At the simplest level, you have clients, auditors, and standards, and they might all be chasing new solutions and data, right? And just like Rob Evans said before, I think really collaboration and interoperability here is key. I mean, what if everyone suddenly buys the satellite data, but we realize it's all duplicative or something? So, and the data that I'm recording may not be useful for auditors, and it may not be useful for clients. So, thinking about, and it's obviously, it's not free either to develop solutions like this. So having that dialogue effectively with the key parties involved and ensuring that new systems and tools and processes and policies, you know, work across the board is like key. And that people, especially when it comes to data, absolutely privacy can be a concern. Depending on what country you're operating in, you can't just willy-nilly buy satellite data and start looking at you know, land coverage, farm coverage, deforestation metrics, etc. So yeah, privacy, and obviously in the EU we have GDPR to safeguard all of that stuff that pertains to your clients, right? So there's a lot there to unpack in that question, but it's absolutely central that you do think about the value for your clients, the value for your system and auditors working together and ensuring privacy. Those are key, I think.
Thank you. Rob, did you want to add to that at all? And while Rob is just about to respond, if I can get all our panelists just to think of a single word to answer a question from Rupert Turnbull, which is, what is the biggest single positive thing that you have learnt during COVID? And if you had to make one change overnight, what would it be? So that'll be the last word, because we're just about to wrap up. So Rob, I don't know if you wanted to add to anything that Robert said, but also if you could come up with your biggest positive hit as well.
Okay, two in one. Just a little bit. Are farmers more accepting of this kind of approach? I think overwhelmingly we've been surprised in how well it's been accepted. The majority have taken a very positive approach to it. Matter of privacy of data, I think certainly the UK-based standards have been very smart in that information that's loaded up to the data rooms has remained the property of the members. They remain the data owners, the data controllers. If anything gets sent to us outside those platforms, it is used once and immediately deleted. That's within our procedures. I think possibly the awareness of data and its protection might not be so widespread amongst the people who have been sending them in. Quite happy to send in videos of their farms to us. Certainly possibly more the case with livestock enterprises. They are possibly very much more aware of how that sort of information, that sort of data, that sort of video could be misused. So maybe they are further down the road in understanding how important control of data is. But so the standards owners did a very good job on that. So that's what I just wanted to add to that one. The things we've learned, I think, is that cooperation between all the stakeholders can lead to very quick and very successful changes to historic ways of doing things. And the thing I'd most like to see is reliable, fast internet access across the UK.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Robert, what was your big learning and your big hope in terms of the one single thing? This is the quick fire because we're 2 minutes over, sorry.
All right, sorry. All right. My big hope personally is that this is an opportunity to shift systems to really become more data-driven and start making decisions based on evidence and shift the status quo that we've been operating in. That's my big hope for the future.
Thank you. Jenny, and then last words, Tom.
I think Rob stole my sort of collaboration, cooperation, so maybe adaptation for me, but yeah, that working together and yeah, let's not go backwards, let's keep going forwards.
Brilliant, thank you. And Tom? Sorry.
Sorry about that. I'm just going to repeat what I said earlier, which is the extraordinary ability of the internet. And whilst I don't want to particularly celebrate them, what Amazon has done, giving us what we want when we want it, available, globally, is utterly extraordinary. And that extraordinary change is available to all of us in each of our industries because it's all based on remote communications and the internet.
Brilliant, thank you. So a huge thank you to our speakers today, to Jenny, to Rob, to Robert, and to Tom. A big thank you to everybody at Land Management 2.0. There is a recording of this available on YouTube. It's now going to be a podcast as well, and they are transcribing the text. So there is no excuse not to spread the word and share after all of this as well. There are a lot of additional questions, and thank you very much indeed for those. We will come back to those questions and answer them to you directly as well. So a huge thank you and have a lovely afternoon. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.